Everyone wants to live an inspired life, yet so many people search for happiness following the footsteps of peers and taking advice from people who have different values and outcomes to which they're searching. There are people born into wealth, graduated from the best universities in the world, and there are people who have none of that and yet are living extraordinary lives full of fulfillment and reward. The purpose of this podcast is to share insights and strategies that allow you to question the status quo and think freely, so you can design your life and be who you want to be. We get one life. Time is our most valuable asset. I believe that when we're free and able to focus on meaningful work, we become better human beings. This is Always Free, and I'm your host, Jason Graystone.
Welcome to the leading podcast for financial empowerment and wealth creation. Subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can connect with Jason on social media and subscribe to the Jason Graystone YouTube channel for weekly videos. Don't forget to also subscribe to the weekly newsletter to receive frequent educational content and action steps to help you design your life so you can be who you want to be. For news on all future events and updates, go to jasongraystone.com.
Well, welcome back to the podcast, guys. I hope you had an amazing week so far. If you're listening to this for the first time, this is the number one podcast for wealth creation and financial empowerment. And if you go back to episode 1 and listen to these podcasts, this podcast will allow you to develop strategies and develop habits and give you actionable steps to go and implement into your life immediately for immediate results. So it's not like kind of these podcasts where you get a little bit of motivation, a little bit of inspiration. This is, you're going to get more results, instant results in your life. If you go back, listen to number 1 onwards, and you apply what I'm teaching you here, it will just change your life. I guarantee it. So I wanted to talk a bit. I'm up in London this week. I'm actually with one of my mentors, Dr. John DiMartini. I'm in the Bloomsbury Hotel in London doing a program here myself. So I wanted to come up and record this podcast for you because there's been a lot rushing around the head this week. And I wanted to talk a little bit about future planning and immediate planning, because I see a lot of people when they're trying to build wealth, they've got to kind of gone about it the wrong way, and they're kind of playing the long game now and the short game long. And I explain what I mean by that as I go through this podcast, but it was all really sparked off when I was picked up by a taxi driver to come to this event on Wednesday morning. Okay, he picked me up at 5:30. It's pitch black outside. I went out, got in the taxi, and we started talking. You know how it is with taxi drivers. You kind of chit-chat about what you're up to, where you're going into London, do you work from London? And I told him a bit about what I did, and I asked him about his plan, what he did, and he said, I get up at 3, I work about 14 hours a day, and I drive the taxi. I said, how's that? And he was like, it's not too bad. It pays the bills, but my plan is to work and keep driving, doing these 14-hour days until I can reach my big goal. And I said, what's the big goal? And he said, to buy a big house. And I said, cool, like that's really cool. Then what? What are you going to do then? And when I said that to him, I was expecting him to just kind of have this plan where he wouldn't have to work and all that. But you could see the color drain from his face because you could quite obviously tell that he had never given that one thought. He'd never given that one bit of attention, and you could see that he didn't have a plan. I said, then what? What I meant was what you're going to do then as vocation-wise. And he had only just realised when I raised that question that he would still have to go and drive to pay for the house that he wanted. And this guy was pushing 50 years old. I find this a lot, right? There's people that 40, 50 years old that start coming to me, particularly want to learn to trade because they want to rapidly accumulate wealth because they've had this dawning realisation that they haven't really got a plan. And they thought they had a plan because of what they've been told as a youngster or growing up. But really what they've been taught is, a plan that's not going to serve them very well. And what you find is when people hit that point and they realize they have that realization, that's when they go out and they try and rapidly accumulate experiences that are high on their values, right? They go and try and buy stuff. They realize that they've been pushed around all this time by people with stronger value systems that believe in their value system, and that there's obviously a big hierarchy of value systems, and we're all pushed around by people with higher values than us. That's how the world works. That's how society works. And what they do is they then go and do them. They go and buy a Lamborghini, ditch the partner for a younger model, and then they go and do travels, and people kind of label them as this midlife crisis. But midlife crisis really only happens to people that have been pushed around by someone else in some way or another. So and a lot of that is subconscious a lot of the time. It's just indoctrination of the wrong strategies and the wrong advice. And it's not aligned with what we truly want. So we end up going a bit doolally. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the two phases of wealth building, which is accumulation, okay, and then preservation, which is later on in your life. Accumulation, preservation. And in the accumulation phase is where we have all the accelerated strategies, okay, the savings, the investments, the passive strategies, and the preservation is where we take our foot off the gas a little bit. We go down to much lower risk, lower, very, very passive, very, very mobile investment returns that allow us to have a willable asset that we can, will down generations and live off of. And there's much more certainty to that type of wealth preservation. So the reason I think we get it a bit wrong is by listening to people who kind of force their opinions on us. And I mentioned it in my newsletter the other day that when we do listen to those silly things and those silly strategies from other people that don't have the results we want, we kind of we end up not believing in ourselves. We start believing them and we don't believe in ourselves. And much of the time it's down to the incorrect advice. So I'll give you teachers, preachers, peers and parents and work colleagues and all this kind of stuff. I'll give you an example. There's a preacher said that giving is better than receiving. Now, of course, there's some certain situations in life where it's great to give and expect nothing in return, but it's generally a cause of limiting beliefs. If you kind of subordinate to you'll always, it's always better to give than to receive, you'll always be unbalanced and you'll find it extremely difficult to accept payment or fair exchange for your service. And of course, you build wealth from giving more and getting more, okay? It's equally balanced. You don't give more than you receive. You get as much as you give. I mentioned this before, the billionaires in the world, they've given plenty to mankind. That's why they're the richest people in the world. Bill Gates has got, everyone's got a computer. Everyone's got a computer on their, they've either got a laptop or a PC, and it's either running Windows or it's running Apple. And guess what? That's serving them people. They love it. They love the PC. They love their MacBook. And Steve Jobs and Apple and Bill Gates, the wealthiest people on the planet because they've served the most people. Another thing someone told me the other day was that the preacher in the church said that they've got to give 10% of their income to the faith and then never do this or that unless you want to go and burn in hell and you don't do anything bad, you're going to go and burn for eternity. And that will cause a limit in the exploration of that person's mind. It will limit their growth. If they're putting others first before their own financial freedom and then they're scared to do this and that and the other, they'll never build any wealth. And of course, once you do build wealth and you become financially free, you become the best you can absolutely be. You give them on a much larger scale. And then there's teachers. Teachers are saying that your income brackets depending on the grade you get at school, and then, depending on the grade you get certain jobs, and those jobs have certain income brackets. And that's another limiting belief on your own self-worth and your value to the world. Anyone who is anyone can earn any amount of money and achieve anything they set their mind to. It's as simple as that. And then there's parents saying, if you want nice things, you got to get a good job. You got to get a job. And what that's basically telling you to do is it's basically glamorizing nice things first. So in encouraging people to raise their lifestyle first and then go and get a job to chase the lifestyle, which is the complete wrong way around. You want to, if you're glamorizing lifestyle and then you're telling your kids that the job is a byproduct of the lifestyle, they're going to have it the wrong way round forever. They're going to chase the lifestyle and get a job just to pay for the lifestyle. Whereas if you tell the kids, actually, go and get a job doing what you really, really enjoy, okay, in a field or an area that you really, really enjoy, and then get that job for experience only. Don't get it for money, get it for experience. Don't worry about going to pay bills. Don't worry about buying nice things. Go and get a job that you enjoy. And of course, when the child does that, they have no they require no motivation to literally go to that job. They don't care if they're being paid, and they're going to naturally shine in that field, and they'll become the best, and then naturally as a byproduct of that they'll earn lots and lots of money anyway. So whilst all that's going on and we're hearing all that and we're taking the wrong action steps in our accumulation phase, we end up a bit stuck. And the reason we end up stuck is because we go into almost a preservation phase with every penny we earn, and we're trying to preserve every penny we earn because we've spent most of the stuff, right? And we've got a tiny little fraction left that we try and preserve and make last as long as possible. So it's arse about face. It's the wrong way round. If you're inspired to aggressively accumulate wealth, you want to think in terms of not freezing up money, not spending everything you earn, and locking it away. Like if you want to get on the property ladder, you want to consider, well, is that something I want to do in accumulation phase, or is it something I want to do in preservation phase? Let's just say that you had 200 grand locked up in a house. The likeliness is that house might rise with inflation rates and the housing, the demand in the market, and it might go up by 50% in 10 years. But in order to realize that gain, you've got to go and sell the house and then get a smaller one. Okay? As I always say, that the investment that you make in yourself will always provide the best return on investment. So just to give you an example then, let's just say that you took that 200 grand and you had a business that was already running, and you had a service and product in your business, and you put that 200 grand into Facebook ads, okay, to advertise your business. Let's just say that for every £1 you spend on Facebook ads, you accumulated about £3.50 in revenue within a 6 weeks period. Okay, if you split that 200 grand up into spending 5 grand per week, you would net about 17.5 grand in 6 weeks in revenue. And you might be listening to this thinking, oh, I know where you're going with this. If you put 200 grand into Facebook ads, then I'll end up with 3.5x, and that would be 700 grand. But that's where you're wrong. It gets better than that. If you was to scale it in over a period of time at, say, 5 grand per week, and then dump all of the returns back into the ad spend, which means that you would take advantage of the compounding effect, instead of 3.5xing your money, your returns would grow exponentially with that compounding, and you would add more and more to the ad spend every single week. And over the course of the year, you could see returns of 6 or 7 times what you invested. 200 grand in this example would then, 1.4 million. So 1.4 million over 10 years instead of 100 grand in 10 years on a property. And that's not unrealistic, okay? As long as you're not limited by the delivery of your product or your service, because obviously with ads, with Facebook ads, you're limited by the capacity, the people that you can serve. That's not unrealistic at all. You just pump money into the ads and you get that money out, and that's the way it is. So if you're aggressively accumulating wealth, then that would be a far better strategy, even if you don't take a penny from the earnings, because you can't take a penny from the earnings in a property anyway. So it's important to understand accumulation strategies and preservation strategies and how they fit together, and the importance of focusing on one over the other, but almost in different ways. So I'm not saying that, I just gave you the example of freezing a load of money in a house, and that's not necessarily the best for accumulation. But people think about freezing money when later on in the wrong way as well. So you can do it in accumulation mode, which is wrong, and you can get it wrong in preservation mode as well. So one of the things is people have this thing where they're just saving and saving and saving and working and working and working to freeze it when they're old, okay? Not thinking about how that capital is going to work when they're old, and they're not planning for the future the right way. A very common one is I ask people, why are you doing what you're doing? And they're like, well, I just want to accumulate cash as fast as possible. I want to do as best I can so that when I'm older, I can just give it to my kids and my kids don't have to work, right? And what they're doing is they've basically got some kind of rescue complex, which usually stems back from a rescue complex that they haven't been rescued in themselves and they don't want to happen to their kids. So they feel like when they're older, they don't want their kids to have to worry. They want to just give all their stuff to their kids, and they work and work and work and work and work and accumulate wealth in that they're going to go and give it to their kids at the end of their life. Well, the problem is that's not going to motivate the kids. It's not going to do the kids any favors for a start, because it's not going to get them motivated to go out and serve people and build their own wealth, which in turn means there's no motivation for them to learn how to manage finances, which in turn means that when you do give them your money, it's going to whittle away in no time whatsoever. If they've not learned how to appreciate money and how to serve people and develop fair exchange and then manage that money wisely, you're talking about a serious depreciation, and that's really going to eat into your principal when you've left it to them. So it's not necessarily the best way either. I think I did some sums the other day. I've got a very, very detailed capacity scale of my entire growth in my income, in my business, what I want to achieve in my compounding. And I worked out the other day that by the time I die, I'm going to live to at least 100. Okay, so by the time I die, when I'm going through that compounding effect towards the later stages of my life, there's a very, very high probability that I'm going to hit between 700 and 800 million. Okay, now if I don't manage that wisely, and of course the 700 to 800 million is all calculated in terms of inflation, interest rates, and what that is relative to today's living. And if I don't manage that wisely, that will be gone in literally 2.5 generations. You're talking 50 years if I don't manage that system wisely. If I just handed it to some kids that didn't have the same value on money and wealth building as me, it'd be gone in 50 years, which would be an absolute tragedy. And some people might be like, 50 years, that's a long time. That's a big old lasting impact you've made. No way. Like, that would be an absolute devastation compared to the impact and the power that could have if it was managed correctly. So you really want to think about that, and if you've got no plan for that, you really need to consider how you're managing your finances now, your accumulation now, how you're managing your preservation and the plan for your preservation, and what you're doing and what the goals are and objectives are in both of those in order to hit the big objective at the end, if that makes sense. So you've heard me say before plenty of times that while you're fit and healthy, it's a great idea to kind of accumulate as much cash as possible, much income, serve, provide value, get the income streams going, make your money work for you, learn how to invest, learn the skill of investing, learn the skill of speculation, go and build a system that you can chuck income into that will grow and grow and grow and accelerate, and it will way surpass inflation rates and all of that, and so that you can really make the most of your income. One of the things you've heard me say is that you should save and increase those savings until eventually you're saving 100% of your income. And you're going to need 100% of your income, and I'll tell you why. Because there's plenty of things in the future that you need to plan for, that if one of these things happened, it could seriously affect how that legacy plays out, how that income plays out. And one of the big ones is longevity, right? Let's just say that you've assumed that you're going to live till you're 90. And let's just say now that you've got 14 million in the bank, right? And you live on 1.2 million per year. That's your cost of living. All right, let's just say. And you get to 90 years old, and through technology and nanotechnology and developments in health and pharmaceuticals and all of this kind of stuff, right? And you're able to, you get to 90 and you feel vibrant. You're like, oh no, like I only anticipated living till I was 90, and now you've got 1.2 million to last you 10 years. Let's just say you're going to live to 100. That's going to last you 10 years. Well, you only anticipated 1 year. So all of a sudden, now you've got to make 1.2 million last 10 years instead of one. And not only that, with inflation, in 10 years, that 1.2 million will be worth, you'll need 2 million. So you can see how that will start really eating into that principle really, really quickly. So you need to overshoot You need to have a plan. You need to have more in case you live longer. The worst thing you can do is have more life at the end of your money than money at the end of your life, right? The other thing is a divorce, right? People aren't planning and overshooting for that kind of thing. People get divorced all the time. And usually, I think it's like 78% or something of marriages who get divorced, it's because of money, right? That is a big one. All of a sudden, your net worth will halve. Okay, so anything that you've got will literally halve overnight, and you need to make sure that you're insured for that or plan for that. And you need to bear in mind all those kind of insurances. There's also disability. You could become disabled. There's making sure that you have taken into consideration inflation, all right, when you're doing your savings and investing and your returns and you're forecasting what that looks like. There's also taxes. Okay, changing tax laws, they change all the time. You want to have a buffer for that. You want to have a kind of insurance against that. And on the other hand, of course, the longer you invest, the longer you save and invest, the more you benefit from reduced tax rates over time. So it works. It's kind of give with one, take with the other, but you want to make sure you've got a buffer there that will allow you some kind of insurance that will allow that to not affect your bigger long-term preservation phase. There's also poor investment choices, okay? So there might be a time where you get hit by a certain speculation or a certain investment class it just tanks, it does terribly. That's some kind of, it might be an anomaly in your strategy, but that might happen. So you need to have a plan for that. You need to have a buffer for that. Then there's liability. Okay, you might get hit by a lawyer. You might get hit. You might be sued. Someone might try to sue you. Some kind of malpractice or some kind of dodgy thing that you made a mistake on, and someone tries to hit you for some money. That could seriously dent your preservation phase. But most of all, it's about having a strategy. Okay, so understanding that what people tell you isn't necessarily the best intention for you, then going out there and whilst you're fit and able to go and serve people to a high level, go and provide value, develop income streams, and at the same time build the skill of investing and learning how to save and learning how to invest and automate your banking, and then go and buy some large cap stocks, and then you might go to some smaller cap stocks, and then you go more speculative and you go up to trading even, and you learn to develop those skills, but you don't stop bringing in the income. Okay, and you want to let that thing compound and aggressively accumulate wealth. If you're in a business, consider how you can use large lumps of money to get more money. Don't try and put it into like frozen preservation investments. Because if you haven't thought about all the things that I've just been over, you don't have time for that. There's so much more to think about than just, ending up with a nest egg. And then when you do want to kick your feet up, that's when you can start preserving the money, making sure that it's managed carefully, much lower risk, much more passive, obviously less returns, but by that point, you've hit it, you got to 100 million, 200 million, 300 million, 500 million, a billion, whatever it is, you can then step back, have that managed for you for a 5% return, and you can live comfortably for generations and generations and generations and generations, and you haven't sacrificed any of your time. You're not going to have a midlife crisis because you've been going out there serving people, doing what you love, instead of some job that you're buying time to get to the point where you think, actually, now I'm in wealth preservation phase, but I've still got to go to work doing something I don't really enjoy, and now I can't even enjoy the stuff that I've been trying to put my money towards. So a big old rant, and I know I've covered a lot of kind of topics there, but my mind's been rushing around this week. I've been inspired to talk about a lot of things. There's been a lot on my mind just from certain conversations and being in the room with John DeMartini as well. But ultimately, the point is this. You want to be free and able to choose what you do in life at any given point. When you get old, you're not going to suddenly feel old and feel like you're not going to have a different mind. You're not going to have your soul is still the same. You're still the same person. It doesn't matter if you're 90, 100, 150, you're still going to have the same personality. You're going to be the same person, and you're going to want to do what you want to do. So plan correctly, like plan for the accumulation, plan for the preservation, and have fun and be free along the entire journey, and you'll live an extremely inspired life, and you'll be able to serve at a much higher level in terms of legacy and generations to come. So that's it for this week, guys. If you're interested in learning more about this stuff, you can go and apply for an application for interest into my Tiers of Freedom program, where I teach everyone how to do this stuff. The link's below in this podcast, so you can go and fill that application in. It's not a commitment of any sort. It's just to say that you're interested. And until next week, guys, have a great rest of your day and weekend, and I'll see you then.
Subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. For news on all future events and updates, go to jasongraystone.com.